Happy Thursday, folks. So today we have Cole Walmsley. I mean, look, I'm not going to spend too much time on his intro, but I'll just cut to the chase. He's working on a Bitcoin thesis, his book. He's got a newsletter, Beyond Infinity. He's been described as a pragmatic mystic. Cole, I'm just going to cut to the chase. Why is Bitcoin infinitely better than you can imagine?
Oh, that is an infinitely big question and an infinitely difficult one to answer. Well, I think money is connected to everything, for better or for worse, in our human civilization. And the best and ultimate solution to money is going to be the best and ultimate solution and innovation that humanity really ever comes up with. And that's what Bitcoin is, in all of the ways that it can impact us is so hard to describe that I like to just say it's infinitely better than we can imagine because it's connected to literally everything: math, philosophy,
Yeah,
energy, politics, science,
yeah,
academics, you name it. Bitcoin's connected to it, and Bitcoin improves it and makes it better in the long run. And
yeah.
it's just
How many
infinitely better
people on
than we can
how many
imagine.
people on this planet do you think actually?
I mean, I said 1% adoption the other day, and I don't think 1% adoption necessarily means everyone fully, and nobody fully
Get it?
understands Bitcoin, but really understands how deeply connected it is to everything. I'd say maybe 2 million, if that. I don't know, somewhere around that number,
Yeah.
give or take.
Yeah, because that's the thing with like, I mean, for me, when I understood it, again, it's always a gradient, right? And you're right, I don't think anyone can
Yeah.
fully ever grasp the extent of Bitcoin. It's just like, but when something clicked for me, I was like, holy shit, like, how is this even available right now? Do you know what I mean? It's just crazy to me
100%.
that something like this is just out there and I can literally spot by it now on my phone.
It blows my mind pretty much every day. I mean, sometimes I'll be in the shower and I'll just like have
Yeah.
to put my hands up to my face. Like, how is this real? The fact that we get to live in this time period in human history and we get to see the death of fiat and the rise of Bitcoin is just
Mm.
utterly amazing. It's a blessing.
Yeah. Yeah, so look, I mean, let's talk about fiat, right? Because I
Mm,
think, uh, personally, just my opinion, I don't see it. I don't think it's at death's door because it's just too entrenched in the way people live. I just don't see it dying overnight, but I do see it
hmm
dying eventually. It'll kind of be a self-inflicted death, I think.
Yeah.
It won't be like a nuclear meltdown. It'll just be like a really slow strangulation that lasts a century. So that's my thesis on fiat currency. Now, um, the powers that be are so vested in fiat. Why would they ever give up that access to the money printer to go for better money? They're incentivized not to go for Bitcoin. That's what I think.
hmm
So how do you bridge that gap? What needs to happen there?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. One is I don't think the current powers that be are incentivized, but I think you're seeing a growing wave of politicians and people that are positioning for power
Mm,
that tailor to Bitcoiners and Bitcoin in general and are slowly kind of inching over into that space. You have Bukele in El Salvador. You have the Malay, who maybe isn't as outspoken of a Bitcoiner as Bukele in Argentina. Maybe it's in the same situation as El Salvador. But I think the rise starts from those nations and those politicians that have been most hurt and oppressed by the fiat regime. And that's your El Salvador's, that's your global south, that's your third world countries that have just
mm,
been so beaten to a pulp by the monetary stranglehold that uh, these fiat monopolies have on them. And
mm,
they're going to be most interested in looking and potentially adopting a solution over time, as well as you're starting to see people in the United States. I think there were 13 senators, I want to say, that were at the Bitcoin conference this year. You had candidates. Trump, of course, was at the Bitcoin conference. It's becoming more and more of a thing. I think Pennsylvania today, statewide, introduced a right to custody bill, and you're starting to see
mm,
this kind of grassroots movement build more and more. And so I say that all to say that this really Bitcoin adoption as a whole comes gradually and then suddenly. But it infiltrates everywhere in that adoption process. And politics and governments and the people in power are part of that process. And I think you're starting to see it play out more and more. I think you'll see the bull run. Bitcoin will hit 100K and it'll just be like, this thing keeps chugging along. It'll become more and more mainstream, and there's going to be a larger outcry from the people to have politicians and people in power that tailor to their beliefs. And ultimately, I think that's how it gets in there.
I mean, look, to a certain extent, I buy that thesis, but it like what really pisses me off sometimes when it comes to the politician. I mean, look, we'll always be led by the least among us, right? I couldn't give a shit. I don't really care, but I do have a problem when someone like Trump, like he then launches his own bloody shitcoin, and it's like, oh my god! After all that shit, like, I mean, do you get it? But this is my point. You see, they're incentivized just to fucking make money, and that's what they're gonna do, right? Why do they give a shit about the long time horizon? They don't give a shit. I mean, surely. I mean, Trump's there for 4 more years, let's say, right? If he wins, which he probably will. And then, right, what's going to happen? Where's the strategic reserve? There's not going to be one. In fact, there's going to be Trump shitcoin. And then it's going to be like, well, you missed the boat entirely. So how do you get past that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I think Bitcoin's time in that large of a sense isn't right now. Like it just wouldn't really work for Bitcoin to be fully adopted this year or the next. And I think, that process is continuing to evolve and grow. And like I said, more and more people are going to be understanding it. Like last cycle, I had no idea what Bitcoin really was about. And now 4 years later, so it works in these cycles. And like Trump's not the political answer. I don't think there really is a political answer, because Bitcoin doesn't care at the end of the day. But I think that'll come with time, and we have no way of really mapping it out or understanding how it's going to happen. But we know that the incentives are too strong for the people to adopt Bitcoin, because it is the best money at the end of the day.
But do you see a future, of where countries rather have a strategic Bitcoin reserve, and then they start sort of, issuing fiat on the back of that? Is that how you see this playing?
I don't see how Bitcoin can be backed by, how fiat can be backed by Bitcoin, because it either has a fixed exchange rate between the US dollar, and then the euro has their own, which we're basically in this same system where we have to compare different exchange rates between countries, and then there's no use for it in even central bank. Or there is a fixed exchange rate, but then the central banks can manipulate it, and then we're right back to square one in terms of solving for the problem of centralized money. So I don't think a decentralized thing can ever become centralized at the end of the day. So I don't see it really playing that route. They might try to do something, but I would still have to go through the legacy financial system if I'm using the dollar or the euro. I have to go through their banking system. It's Saturday. I can't wire money over to somebody else, right? I'd rather just use Bitcoin and have final settlement within 10 minutes, or use the Lightning Network, whatever it is, and hold the keys to my money and know that it won't be debased as well. So I think it's just, economies converge on a single monetary good, and Bitcoin is that monetary good in the long run.
So it's the store of value argument, basically. That's where you see nation states adopting. That's the use case for Bitcoin, not so much unit of exchange.
Yeah, well, it's also interesting because Bitcoin in the long run as well changes the nation state model. At the end of the day, it changes the way we operate governments, and it changes the way that we receive governance, because there's no monopoly between money and state anymore. So they have much less power over us and what we're able to do. And it's similar to the separation of church and state. And there's actually a lot of parallels to it in the early 1500s, where you had this monopolistic power between church and state in Europe, in the Roman Empire. And people, were kind of in the dark on what was really going on and how abusive this power really was. And then Martin Luther comes along. He posts his 95 Theses to the door. And then what do they use? They use the printing press to get that out to the masses. And they wake up, and that ends up actually changing the governance model into the modern day nation state that we now know. And so there's a lot of parallels. We have this monopoly today between money and state, and a lot of people really don't understand how abusive that power is. But then you have this guy, Satoshi Nakamoto, comes along and he posts Bitcoin online. And then we use another decentralized form of technology in terms of being able to spread and share information, the internet. And then Bitcoin starts to make its way around and people start to wake up. And then ultimately, I think, like I said, the modern day nation state model that we know now changes down the line.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think, and I mean, that's the beauty of, well, I mean, when I look at the Roman Empire never actually went away; it just became the Catholic Church, right? So there is, and I think that's what I feel. Just going by your analogy, I don't think central banks will go away; they will become sort of demi-Bitcoiner sort of thing, right? I mean, that's the best case scenario, I think, because I completely agree with you. I mean, this whole fiat thing is not like, I mean, it's really an experiment, actually, if you think about it in the long scale of money, right? I mean, we've never had money that was simply printed out of nothing. And now we're living about 70 years, 50, 60 years in this sort of time gap in history. I think when you look back at these times, people won't be wondering, how the hell did these guys just kind of create stuff out of nothing, right? And even when it comes to things like election debates, and I look at this stuff, and it's like when I try and bring stuff into reality, it's kind of like neither of the parties are going to talk about any of this, right? Like I mean, I don't even think they understand it. Like, I still think a majority of the people out there believe that we have a gold standard. I don't think people just understand fiat at all.
Yeah, I certainly had. I mean, I went through 12 years of government schooling. They like to call it public schooling, but it's government schooling. And I had no understanding of what money is and the impact. We maybe talked about the Federal Reserve being introduced in 1913, and the Green New Deal during the Great Depression was great, and it saved us from. And so basically, like, everything I learned was the opposite in that sense. And so I had no understanding of what money was until I actually explored it on my own and started looking through an Austrian lens and through Bitcoin. And I started doing self-research, and it was like, what is the actual truth here? And the truth became obvious after a while. And then you realize, well, there's such a great incentive to cover up the truth. Why would a government that has the ultimate power in all of powers to be able to print money instantaneously, why would they produce academic textbooks and curriculums for their citizenry, their younger generations, that say that their power is bad and monopolistic and manipulative? No, they're going to say that it's good, it's rightful, it's just, etc., etc. So that's the indoctrination that we're under, as Americans, and I'm sure most other places as well. And most people just aren't aware of it until they look behind the curtain and see what's really going on.
Yeah. I mean, that kind of brings us to this whole CBDC argument, right? I mean, what the hell is happening with the CBDCs in America? Because I know the UK is also looking, so that's where I'm based. London, the powers that be are like, hey, yeah, you know what? It's already started. I mean, this whole propaganda about how awesome a cashless society would be and how easily you can move money from A to B. And it's like, that's already happening, right? And a lot of the plebs, obviously, well, not the plebs, but a lot of the population are just like buying this complete, like, they love the ease of use of it. They have no idea the opportunity cost of what that means. What's it like in America? I mean, how would people take to something like the CBDC?
Yeah, from what I've seen, out of all the political topics, it seems that the American people are most staunchly against, both in outspokenness and in number, in terms of the percentage of people that are outspoken against it. They're most staunchly against CBDCs as anything I've seen, both sides of the political aisle. And then I know, it's funny because the fiat regime and those at the top that kind of control the global south through the IMF, the World Bank, and these other organizations, they kind of test run, and they have test run. I believe it was in Nigeria, they kind of test ran a CBDC, and it was an utter and complete failure, 97% disapproval rating, somewhere around that number. So it just completely failed, and I think it's a talking point to a degree, but I think it's really a non-factor in the long run, and people like really are staunchly against it. They understand that China more or less has a CBDC over there, and they don't want to be living in China.
Yeah,
Again,
yeah.
on both
It's
sides.
Yeah. What about the ease of use though? I mean, like again, looking at my own life, for me, it's like, oh my God, I don't need to carry my wallet. I just use my phone and I Apple Pay for shit, right?
Right, but it's like it's what we
That,
already do, and to
yeah,
be honest, we already have a CBDC. It's just like,
yeah. It's all digital anyway.
and it's run by a central bank anyways. It's just maybe
Yeah,
we don't have a
exactly.
credit score and all this, that we can't buy $100 of meat in a month, whatever. But it's like, listen, we have a digital currency. Cash is hardly used, and it's controlled
Mm.
and manipulated by a central bank. So
Yeah.
it's more or less already here.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, and that's true across all countries. In fact, it's more true during things like international transfers, where
Mm-hmm.
these could be stopped, it could be reversed, it could be whatever, and
Right.
there's so many controls. And I think that's the other argument. I don't know if you read the ECB, the European Central Bank came out with this ridiculous paper, sort of lambasting Bitcoin, right? And it's basically just saying buy Bitcoin or you're going to have fun staying poor. That's what I got out of it. And I was like, what do these guys are like? I mean, these are all highly paid, highly intellectual people sitting on these and coming up with this drivel. And it's like, you and I are doing a podcast and we bloody get it. We don't even like, how is it that they don't get like, I don't even think they don't get it. I think it's just malice now at this stage. They're like, oh my God, right? I need to protect myself. I need to protect our currency. I'm going to have to lambast Bitcoin. Otherwise,
Yeah,
these guys win.
that's pretty much what it is. It's because, listen, they get paid off of theft through central banking and them having a money printer and being able to wield money to their power. So of course they're going to say the thing that eliminates that theft and them getting paid is bad, because if they support it, they're out of a job, they're out of an income, and they're broke. So of course they're going to come out and say, well, no, this Bitcoin thing is bad. And it was funny that said they essentially said if you don't adopt Bitcoin, you'll be poor,
Mm,
which is quite funny
exactly.
and true
Yeah,
to a degree.
and true. Yeah. So they do get it then. It's like
Yeah,
it's
right.
like and like especially the Europeans, right? Because like we already have the euro standard, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it's so bizarre if you think about the euro, because all the countries in the eurozone are completely different demographically, right? They're completely different geographies, they have different economies, they have different sort of distribution of people, they have different lifestyles, and yet they're all governed by this random collection of individuals calling themselves the ECB, and then they issue debt. Like that's it. And that's the model. Nobody asked a question at all. And obviously the UK broke out of it with Brexit and all that, but then that became a much more political immigration type issue as opposed to like the pure monetary issue, which is what I think it really is.
Yeah.
So when it comes to something like the BRICS nations or these other political sort of entities around the world, or the United Nations even for that matter, Bitcoin, like even they can buy Bitcoin, right? That's the point of this. Like, it's not as if Bitcoin's going to tell you, no, you can't buy me because you're against me. It allows both the good and the bad guys to actually partake in the economy. So, so I mean, that's why when I see like Larry Fink who comes in and starts hoovering up all the bloody Bitcoin, I'm like, oh my God, I don't like that. But then, it's money. Like, what can you do?
Right. And I think that's also a good time to give a shout out to Satoshi for designing the halving mechanism, because having 95% of the supply essentially in circulation before these large financial institutions that maybe don't have the best track record in terms of honesty and doing the best with their money. Before they woke up to it, 95% of the Bitcoins that will ever exist are already in circulation. So it is a good place to shout out to Satoshi, because who knows if BlackRock and Larry Fink and Blackstone and all these other big financial institutions got in when there was only 500,000 Bitcoins in circulation. Well, there'd be a lot more room for them to manipulate and potentially bring Bitcoin to the ground.
Yeah, yeah. So the What's your take on the ETFs? Net good, net bad, net I don't give a shit.
Net, I don't give a shit. Net, it's not real Bitcoin, so I don't care about it. I think it serves perhaps a need in the fiat financial world. It's a non-factor in the Bitcoin world because it's not real Bitcoin. There's no when Bitcoin is global money, there's no financial instrument that tracks the price of Bitcoin one to
Yeah,
one, and that's what you hold to do so.
yeah,
No, it's just money, and you use it, and you gain the value appreciation that comes with the global productivity increase. So the ETF's a non-factor, and maybe you can use it advantageously as leverage, and you can borrow against it. But I don't care for it at all. I would never advocate someone to go and buy the ETF. I
yeah,
don't really care
yeah.
about it.
I mean, I guess it is possibly useful for the likes of, I don't know, maybe someone in, but still, I think I completely agree. I mean, it's the denominator is the money, you see. Like, so in
Yeah,
any equation, when
right.
and if you screw up the denominator, I mean, what are you actually measuring? You know?
Yeah, it's like
Um,
at the end of the day, if you want to participate in the economy down the line, you're going to have to own real Bitcoin. So all of these ETF holders at some point are going to have to sell their ETFs
for what?
and yeah, to go and buy the thing it's tracking actually by real Bitcoin.
Yeah. Yeah, that's bizarre. Like, I mean, that's such a
Right.
weird thing. Like, if you look at something like options or futures, where you never take delivery of the 7 billion tons of coal that you've ordered. But in this case, they'll actually have to encash that ETF and then immediately convert that to actual Satoshis
Correct.
just to survive.
Yeah, it's way different when the ETF is an actual monetary good, versus a collection of stocks or whatever it is that you're never going to be using Apple stock to go and buy a hamburger. It's just
Yeah,
not reality. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, no,
but
exactly.
this is what fiat does, and this is what the fiat financial world does: is they find ways to make money off of curated financial instruments, and they take a 1 to 2% fee off of it, and people accept it. Oh, great! I have access to it now. I wouldn't be able to get access to it without you. But it's way different because Bitcoin is permissionless, and actually, the hoops you would have to go through to get Bitcoin would be less than signing up for the fiat banking system and the brokerage accounts and KYC and all of this stuff that you would have to go through. It's trying to financialize. Fiat is trying to financialize another thing, but Bitcoin is different than every other thing ever.
Yeah, that's interesting. That is. Right. I mean, we've kind of flirted around the topic, but what about the yield stuff that Sailor mentioned so much these days? Is that a fiat concept?
It is a fiat concept because, and I wrote a post about this, like yield in fiat, okay, I think is plausible today, but in the long run, there's not going to be yield in fiat. So your yield, if I were to give 10 Bitcoin to a bank, would have to come back to me. If I wanted 10% yield on that Bitcoin, I have to give my 10 Bitcoin to a bank. They would have to give me back 11 Bitcoins to fulfill that promise. And so they'd have to find a way to make 10% more Bitcoin than what I gave them, which would mean they would either have to take Bitcoins from another depositor, give it to me. Okay, then I've made my 10%. But that quickly runs into a problem because you can't just print more like you can today and cover the depositors that's not whole over there, because there's only 21 million and everything is verifiable. Or the bank would have to invest and put my Bitcoin at risk somewhere else to then hopefully make the 10 Bitcoins back and another 10% to which they give to me. So it's like you can't just give your Bitcoin to a bank and basically have them guarantee. You'll have to risk it, okay, but that's normal market behaviors. If I want more money, I'm going to either have to go work for it or I'm to put my capital to risk somewhere else.
But the hurdle rate is way too high. That's what I think. And Saylor knows that. Like Saylor understands that it's a 40% CAGR over the last, whatever, 4 or 5 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, for me as a Bitcoin bank to guarantee you a 10% return on your Bitcoin, I mean, for you, it's the opportunity cost is just ridiculous. You're better off simply holding the asset that's going to
Right.
grow 40% a year than trying to risk it and get 10%. It makes no sense, right? And even if you did do that, the onus then is on me as a Bitcoin bank to go and find that source of investment. And it's like, that's way too risky. And why would I do it?
Correct.
Like, it's just not worth my while.
It's not, because at the end of the day, the global productivity increase and the value appreciation that accrues to Bitcoin as a result is the yield
Yeah.
that you're getting. And that's like,
Yeah.
I'm completely fine with that, because global productivity is increasing at an exponential rate, and that's going to lead to my Bitcoin increasing in value at an exponential rate. I won't need to go hunt down yield like I would today, because my fiat, my US dollars, lose 5% a year. So I've got to go hunt down something that gives me at least 5% just to break even. And that's why it's a fiat concept. And
Agreed.
Bitcoin fits
Agreed. And
this too.
unless Saylor's argument, by the way, could be that you give me the Bitcoin, I give you the yield in fiat, right?
Right. Yeah. And
Now
that's what
that
I
could
love
be
with
a
it.
hit. Yeah.
I think there's plausibility to that. I think it makes sense in the fiat world to a degree. But I just don't, I think it's a non-factor in the long run, because fiat is a non-factor in the long run. So I don't really, yeah, it's high time preference to
Yeah.
measure markets
So
or the future through that lens.
agreed. Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you on that, right? And it was kind of just quite jarring to me when Saylor repeatedly talks about this.
Yeah,
I thought it
agreed.
was like, I mean, I thought he got Bitcoin. I mean, maybe he does, and maybe he just has to play that part of being, hey, look, he's a public CEO. I mean, he can't just debase the US dollar every time he talks about it, right? He's not going to do that. So maybe he is sort of kind of trying to walk that line a bit and keep his sort of bosses happy.
Yeah, I think he certainly has a fiduciary duty to his shareholders, and he wants MicroStrategy to go up as much as anything. And I think he also wants other financial institutions and their chairmen of the board and their CEOs and their CFOs and their CIOs to adopt Bitcoin, because that only boosts MicroStrategy's position as such a large holder of Bitcoin in financial markets. So I think, he does kind of take it through that lens of like, hey, this other CEO of this big company over here, they might not be able to understand and see Bitcoin if I present it as a replacement to the dollar. So let me present it as this brilliant store value that you can use as pristine collateral, whatever it is. And so maybe that helps them. And I get that. Like, I think that makes sense for him, again, because he has a fiduciary duty and he wants the best for MicroStrategy and his company. But I think also on the other side, we should be, I think it'd be wise to unabashedly tell the truth. And if we're kind of covering things up and we're hiding things and we're maybe presenting a not fully true narrative, I think there's maybe something going on there. I don't know, but I'd prefer telling it like it is with Bitcoin and
Yeah, no,
fiat and everything
I
else.
think so. And if you look at some of his older interviews, he always told it like it is. So I think something's
Right.
changed. Could be pressure, could just be the fact that, I mean, he's literally poised to be one of the richest people on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
And that comes with its own risk, right? So maybe he's trying to sort of buy himself some sort of insurance, if nothing else,
Yeah, he says, go ahead.
No, I was just going to finish your thought.
He says he doesn't want to be a martyr. He wants to be a winner. And yeah, I mean, I get that to a degree, but like, give me liberty or give me death. I think the truth is freedom.
Yeah.
At the end of the day. So, it is what it is. And Bitcoin doesn't care about Saylor. So we'll keep trucking along regardless.
Yeah. TikTok next block.
Exactly right.
Okay. So no to the ETFs, CBDCs, whatever. What about MicroStrategy? Is that what any of your Bitcoin or fiat savings?
I would differ savings and investment. I think Bitcoin is savings, and I think MicroStrategy would be an investment. I don't know who shares a MicroStrategy because, listen, they're so asymmetrically positioned versus the rest of the financial market. That provides them with a massive opportunity and a massive ceiling for price appreciation. They've outperformed Bitcoin over the last 4 years. So I think it makes sense to hold a few shares because at the end of the day, they do, I say they hold Bitcoin, but they don't actually hold Bitcoin. Their custodian is Coinbase, and there's a lot of potential issues there. And that's why
Is that public? Sorry, like I don't know. I mean, I've heard that Coinbase is their custodian, but is that factual?
that's, I'm not going to say it's factual, but that's pretty much what I've heard. I know
Okay.
that they don't hold it themselves, or I'm not going to say I know that. I'm pretty positive that they don't hold it themselves and that Coinbase is their custodian and how they acquire Bitcoins and et cetera, et cetera. And there's a potential huge blow up situation down the line because Coinbase is also the custodian for 90% of the ETFs.
Yep.
And they're issuing financial institutions. And there's no proof of reserves there, right? We can't really see if they actually hold those Bitcoins. For one, I don't even know as a MicroStrategy shareholder if MicroStrategy can move their Bitcoins if need be. And so there's a level of hesitation there. And I don't know, it's perhaps worth holding a few shares like I do. At the end of the day, if it's not Bitcoin, I don't care. And I also think there's a difference between savings and investment. And Bitcoin to me is savings. And so that's where all of my savings will be denominated. And I'm happy to maybe make some investments to where I can produce positive returns in Bitcoin terms like MicroStrategy has.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I couldn't agree more with you. I think fiat sort of blurs the line between savings and investment. We've never really actually had a savings tool because fiat is a shit savings tool. It's a great spending tool. And gold again used to be, I guess, the de facto savings, but Bitcoin just blows that out of the water just in sheer performance. So yeah, it's kind of like, and then of course, if you do want to invest something and take on the risk of potentially getting a higher return than what the market gets you, then your hurdle rate, I believe, is somewhere around 40 to 50% a year. So anything that I look at, and if the person can guarantee me a 45% return over the next 5 years for my fiat, I might consider not buying Bitcoin with that sum of money. But anything lower than that, it just makes zero sense to me.
Yeah, and it's like, how can you guarantee that too? At the end of the day, there's a leap of faith that you have to make. There's no guaranteed 5% return, much less 45%.
Yeah.
Whereas I know Bitcoin, there's only 21 million. I can go check.
Yeah.
Every 10 minutes. I'll sleep just fine holding Bitcoin.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think so too. I think a lot of people are slowly trying to get out of this traders mindset, right? I have so many friends who are constantly worrying about, well, how should I buy and what stock should I put into? And I'm like, just park it in Bitcoin and go to sleep. You'll be fine, But it's almost like it's very alien to them. I think this, and for me as well, to be honest, at the start, because if you're not working on your portfolio, it's almost as if something's wrong, right? Surely you're gonna have to work. I think we have like this subliminal urge to work for gains, even in fiat terms. And that's why when you remove that work element from any of this stuff, like it's almost physics, right? I mean, you take out time and energy out of anything. Well, how the hell is that thing even real? It's not. It can't be. Not in our universe.
Yeah, I think some people kind of like you were discussing, it's like too good to be true almost. I could just buy Bitcoin, go to sleep. I don't have to check the price of it every 4 seconds. I don't have to make a trade 18 times a week, and go to sleep, 3x levered on my trade and worry about getting margin called and all this nonsensical stress that you throw on yourself. I could just buy Bitcoin. And some people are like, what? There's no way that's real, because we're so engrossed in this fiat world where we have to work for our money and then we have to work again to keep its value. And Bitcoin fixes that too. And that's why Bitcoiners that's why they care about it so much. And that's why their voices are so loud all over the place. And that's why they tell you Bitcoin fixes this too. I remember before I ever knew what Bitcoin was really about, I'd see under comments, because I started as a trader in equity markets, and I lived that lifestyle, and I would see under some comments that said Bitcoin fixes this. I'd be like, what are you talking about? Like, it's like you kind of just shrug it off. And then now I'm at the point where I'm like, they were spot on. And
Yeah.
it's true. I don't have to worry about waking up 5 days a week and entering into a trade and watching some chart go up and down and all this nonsense.
Yeah,
It's
because like I mean, I think
makes it
one thing,
great.
if nothing else, I think it's kind of shown. Bitcoin is shown like this whole thing. Like
It's
it's just
fiat.
charts. Yeah, it's total fiat.
Yeah, I'm happy to do away with that. Been there, done
um,
that.
yeah. So look, I mean, okay, look, obviously you're a Bitcoiner. Obviously, you buy the stuff, you hold it, you understand savings, you understand investments. What about spending Bitcoin? Where does that factor into your lifestyle, if it does?
Yeah, I think Bitcoin is useless if it's never spent. Like, what good does money ever do for us if we earn it and then take all of it to the grave with us? And sure, maybe kind of the honorable thing to do with Bitcoin is you die and you don't tell anyone where or what the keys are. But yeah, at the end of the day, money is meant to be spent. So I'm not
Mm,
against spending it, but it does subconsciously rewire how you think about spending. And like I borderline hate spending money now. Like it's just
yeah,
the bane of my existence to
yeah.
spend money. And I'll research ways on how to take out payment plans for as long as possible. I just posted something to Twitter today about it because
Flight
I want to
ticket.
spend this.
I really like that one actually. The
Yeah,
plane ticket that you purchased, right?
yes. I want to spend as little money today as possible because I want to stack as much Bitcoin today as possible. And I'll continue to buy the essentials, my groceries, and I'll continue to buy high quality foods because I want to live as long and healthy as possible. But it really fixes spending the mindset. I
Mm,
used to be a gambler, specifically playing
mm,
No Limit Texas Hold'em as a poker player, and I would sports bet too. It's like I rarely do those things, and I still enjoy them, and I'll go play poker every once in a while. But the mindset and the mentality around those things is way different. It's like, well, no, I don't have to risk $1,000 at the poker table. I can just park it
mm.
in Bitcoin, be fine, and spend it somewhere else.
Gotcha.
Which
Yeah.
which
So
is a good thing for the market because, and I don't think perhaps enough people realize this, is that I'm only going to give my Bitcoin up to something that I need or to something that is highly valuable that I'm willing to give up my Bitcoin for.
yeah,
And so
subjectively
that,
speaking, for you
correct.
mean?
Yeah. Correct. So over time, only this leads to things being produced that are only necessary or highly valuable market wide because more and more people are going to realize, hey, I only want to spend my Bitcoin on things I need or something that's highly valuable. So it eliminates all the low quality fluff that I don't care about. And it reintroduces these highly valuable goods and services back to the market. And okay, I'll give my Bitcoin for that because it's
Yeah.
high quality. And that's a great thing for us as consumers is we want higher and higher quality goods coming onto the market. Whereas fiat, it seems like, the things that are manufactured today, they just fall apart easier. The furniture,
Yeah, of course.
it's all fiat and getting degraded over time in
Yeah,
quality.
and that's true for what you eat, what you grow, what you watch. Even like
Precisely.
some of the movies, if you go back, I was watching. What was I watching recently? 12 Angry Men, right? It was made in the 50s or something. And holy smoke,
Awesome
they,
movie.
they literally just put in their entire life into it. Like that's proof of work. That's verifiable proof of work,
Mm,
right? Netflix produces about 12 shows in a year, like a dime a dozen, right? And it's like,
yeah.
what the hell? Because it's fiat, you know. And of course, Netflix is a brand, so yeah, they're it's easier for them to get access to the money printer than you as an independent filmmaker, for example, right? Like
Yeah.
that's just the fiat world we live in, and it's no different, I think, from a consumerist economy that we talk about, and like, oh my god, we're consuming too much, and America is gonna like destroy itself on consumption. Well, I mean, the most rational thing to do with the money that's actually losing value every day is to bloody get rid of it for crap that you might possibly want.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. If my money is going to lose 80% of its value tomorrow, I'm just going to spend it today,
of course, yeah,
on whatever it is.
yeah,
And obviously that number is smaller with fiat, but at the end of the day, it's losing money versus gaining money. And the spending habits that come with both are on two
yeah.
different sides of the spectrum.
Yeah. And I think that like the quality aspect that you mentioned, I think is like totally true. I mean, it's totally bang on. Like my quality of life has improved since I became a Bitcoiner. And it's got nothing to do with the
Yeah,
fiat world of it. It's literally because I've started making decisions which actually matter so much more to me in the long run, right? And it's even things like,
exactly.
oh my God, right? I don't want to skimp on price because now to me it's like, well, I don't give a shit what the fiat nomination is. I actually don't give a shit because my savings are going to overcome that anyway. I might as well just get the best thing that I can possibly get.
Yeah. You view things as you're willing to pay a little bit more over time for it now because you know it's higher quality and it'll last further over time. And
Yeah,
then you won't have to spend your Bitcoin down the line to replace it.
yeah,
And that's the world we're stepping in. This is why I'm like, Bitcoin is infinitely better than you can imagine. Think about all the different topics we talked about in a little over 40 minutes.
yeah.
And we're still infinitely short of all of the ways that it improves the universe, humanity,
Oh,
civilization, everything.
yeah. What is your? I guess just on that. Now that we've spoken about the positives of it, I mean, let's potentially touch one of the negatives, which I think. I mean, actually, no. I'll be interested to hear what you think. Is what is the biggest threat to Bitcoin today?
Good question. It's tough to the biggest threat, the pole shift. That's what,
How do you mean?
and yeah, I don't think most people have heard about this, but
No.
it's something that I came across a few months ago. Friend, hardcore Bitcoiner, he runs a podcast with another Bitcoiner, and he sent me the podcast because he was talking about something I was talking about on it, and I listened to it, and they were talking about this pole shift. They kept saying pole shift, pole shift. I was like, what is it? And it talked about. It seemed like there was this catastrophic seismic event coming up on the horizon. I was like, what do you? I texted my buddy after. I was like, what's going on? I want to learn more. And so I ended up getting into their Telegram group chat, and they were talking about this pole shift. And so essentially, there's a faction of humanity that believes every so often, some people believe every 6,000 years. Other sources have said it's the last time it's happened was 270,000 years ago. Basically, is that the poles on Earth, North and South Pole, they shift places on Earth over time, and this shift in the magnetic field affects the oceans, affects tectonic plates, it affects the essentially, I'm going to use a explain like on five term, the protective layer over the Earth. It affects that as well. So then solar flares come in, and potentially this is something that could be a cataclysmic event. And some people have said it's going to happen in the next 10 to 20 to 30 years. And I've done a little bit of research on YouTube about it, but I kind of brush it off to the side and hope that it doesn't happen. But at the end of the day, it kind of sticks in the back of my head, like, what if this is true and what if this is coming? So that would be pretty significant because there would be massive floods. And there's a couple of things that I think about kind of just in my internal dialogue and questioning of it. There's this famous story of the city of Atlantis that was this super advanced civilization and
No.
part of the world that essentially went completely underwater thousands of years ago. So that would kind of track with this pole shift causing a massive flood and all sorts of these significant changes in the global landscape. And then there's the other story of Noah's Ark, there being this massive flood and Noah bringing on animals and stuff. And whether that's true or not, we don't really know, but there is perhaps some correlation there. So I would say that's the biggest threat to Bitcoin. I think, honestly, Bitcoin would survive ultimately because if someone's running a node,
Yeah, you need one
we're,
node.
we're chilling.
Yeah, to restart the whole. And then
yeah,
if the pole shift even was real, and even if it did happen, I mean that spells the end of the world. I mean not only Bitcoin, but the world.
right. And that's what I like. That's what I think it would take to get rid of Bitcoin. Like that's the type of threat that would need to be presented to it for it to go away.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like the FUD that you hear, or you still hear in 2024, which is ridiculous. Things like, but what if the electricity went off, or what if the internet went off? And you're like, Jesus Christ! I mean, can you imagine living without electricity and internet for a day? Forget about Bitcoin. Can you live just by yourself? Even if you
We'd have a lot bigger problems to worry about if that were the case.
Yeah. It's just grasping
nuclear war.
Any possible. Yeah, I mean, like I have one negative. Well, not I wouldn't even say negative, but I think on the technical layer of Bitcoin, if you look at how mining happens, right? So you have these mining pools now because nobody's very few people are solo miners because they don't get guaranteed cash flow. You're better off just joining a mining pool. And there's only so many. I'm going to say 11. It could be 13, whatever, mining pools. So it's a bit of centralization within the mining pools. So in other words, we don't know who runs those mining pools, if those mining pools were taken over by someone else, if they just all went offline. The mining layer might get impacted, but then there are also people doing solo mining anyway, right? So I mean, potentially that could get captured or seized, or could have an exposure to an attack vector by a nation state, for example, stuff like that. I think on the technical layer might potentially cause short-term harm to the Bitcoin blockchain, but we can quickly recover from that as well, I think.
Yeah, I think there's potential for that. And I think it goes back to what I said earlier about Satoshi building the halving mechanism and having 95% of supply already circulating today to win this mining centralization of mining pools. And I don't really know a ton about the mining pools, but to where it's a potential threat, but it's much less of a threat than if 1 to 2% of Bitcoins had only been mined today.
Yeah, and what about if we did win though, and you're in a world now where, like you said, the money is pristine, right? The money is actually valuable. You can put it under your mattress and go to bed, right? Metaphorically,
right. But
in that world, it's Is it stagnant? Is it a stagnant world? Because you and I know our money's going to appreciate. So why the hell would I ever invest? How are you going to get the next Silicon Valley? How are you going to get the next innovative Apple or whatever, right? Because the access to capital is so limited. Do you think that's I don't know, a potential future?
I think Bitcoin doesn't eliminate investment. I think it fixes it, because even for me, like, I'm interested in starting an investment fund because there's a new renaissance coming, and there's all sorts of companies and businesses and ideas and people bringing those ideas and companies to the market that are in line with that new renaissance, that provide super high quality, valuable goods and services to the market. Regenerative farming, alternative schooling, nuclear energy, all sorts of these things that are, plant medicines, all sorts of these things that are coming as real solutions and real goods and services that will be valued by the Bitcoin market, that I would like to invest in because I want to see them come to life. I want to see them exist. It's the world that I want to live in. It's the things that I want to pay for, that I would be willing to give my Bitcoin. So there is that. And then there's and we're working through it at Get Here. Well, there's a way to invest in those companies, and over time, because business, and much like everything else, falls down to proof of work. And a business with more proof of work and proof of work is just cash flow, right? Profitability. So if I can invest in a company with proof of work that is in line with one of these new Renaissance ideas, and then I get a percentage of those cash flows, and I'm still stacking Bitcoin, and still getting, with the Bitcoin that I stacked, the baked in value increase. And so I don't have to sweat too much about the Bitcoin that I'm receiving, because it comes with that baked in value increase, and because there's other metrics than just return on investment, right? Return on humanity. Sometimes we get paid in a different currency. For me, coaching basketball is something that I've done in the past, and it's actually something I'm stepping into now. Coaching the younger generations is like, I coach as a volunteer, and it was one of the most fulfilling, joyful things I've ever done. And so I got paid in a different currency, right? And so there's different ways to skin the cat, and I think it becomes not about speculation, but it becomes about proof of work and what you want to bring to the world. And
Gotcha.
That's what investing becomes, and it saves it at the end of the day.
Yeah, that I think that's beautiful. I think that's great. I think yeah, I like the fact that you just get paid in a different currency. So yes, ROI is not the only valid KPI.
100%.
Cool. It's been a whirlwind chat, right? So I'm gonna have to let you go, but I'm gonna give you the rapid fire first. 5 questions, no wrong answers, off the cuff. Ready?
Let's do it.
All right. Describe Bitcoin in one word.
Freedom.
What non-zero chance is it that Bitcoin is actually a psyop that's being run by the elites?
0.001%.
No chance then.
Non-zero chance though.
How often do you check the Bitcoin price in Fiat?
Maybe 2 to 3 to 4 times a week.
It's not bad. Yeah, I mean, I'm on at least once a day, which I need to get rid of. But yeah,
I mean, some days it's more than it fluctuates. I don't know.
Yeah,
some days more than that.
Will there ever be harder money?
Well, there can't be. How can there be harder money than something that's fixed and finite? Something that's deflationary, but then if it's too deflationary, Bitcoin is just naturally deflationary because of lost keys and people dying and things of that nature, but it's ultimately fixed. And that's why it's the immaculate conception that can't be replicated.
Nice. And talking about the immaculate conception, who do you think Satoshi was or is?
All of us. I have no idea. Everybody is Satoshi. We're all Satoshi, and I think it's the most beautiful thing about Bitcoin is that somebody came along and created this just purely and utterly brilliant innovation, brought it to the world, mined a bunch of it, and disappeared. Took absolutely zero credit for it, and disappeared into the ether for us to be freed and not have to pinpoint the creation on an individual or a group of people and all of the calamity that would come with that. I think it's mystically amazing. It's the greatest mystery ever, probably will continue to be. And it's the essence off of that and the essence of Bitcoin. I mean, those two things go hand in hand. It's like, that's why the essence of Bitcoin is so pure. It's because this person, group, whatever, being that created it made the most humble act that could ever be done to humanity, to free us all and take no credit for it. There's nothing more humble and amazing than that.
Yeah, absolutely, completely 100% agree with that. Cole, look, it's been an absolute pleasure, man. Thanks a lot for taking the time out. Really good luck with the book as well. Keep us updated on how that goes. We'll talk about it on a following podcast. But yeah, look, thanks again for your time, and I'm gonna leave it here. But yeah, we'll be in touch and we'll talk soon.
Thank you, brother. Sounds good.
Cheers, mate. Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.